No, Your Honor.
Court received no notice from the jury.
All right, good job.
Right here. Business with me.
Thank you. All right, we good, Agent Louder?
Yes.
Sorry about that. I
okay.
didn't notice whatsoever. And we had just started. We had finished talking about liver mortars, and you said blood was pooling, and because of the neck wound, that could have been a reason why you didn't have as much. Correct?
Yes, possibly from the
Possibly.
wound.
And correct me if I'm wrong on anything I say, but you said that the knife that was found by the canine unit was about 50 to 60 feet away from the body.
I believe it was approximately 50 to 60 feet away.
Okay. And the problem with law enforcement that you guys can guesstimate and have take measures out all the time. How wide is this room? Would you say? I am putting you on the spot. But
I don't know, maybe 50 feet? Not,
Okay.
Probably not even that.
Okay.
Probably 30.
All right. So between 30 and 50, possibly, you would say how wide this room is?
Probably.
Because I'm just trying to give the jury a better estimation of how far the knife was away from the body.
The reason I don't have an exact measurement from that is typically we don't measure pieces of evidence and how close they are to a body. We measure them based off of reference points that we've discovered on the scene. So it's just an estimate.
Okay. So it could have been even shorter than that. It could have been farther than that, but you just give an estimate.
Just that broad range. I don't think it was much more than that.
Okay. And that still helps. It wasn't a football field away.
No.
And just, did you ever pick up the knife? Well, you picked up the knife and held the knife and examined the knife.
After I had photographed it, I then collected it.
Okay. And if a person were to throw that knife, a person could possibly throw that knife from that body to the spot that you found it.
Sure.
And when you take that, I guess, left or right off of Highway 98 onto
Old Bailey.
Old Bayleaf, if you continue to go straight, it turns into a dirt road, correct?
That's correct.
And it looks like there's usually a gate up or something like that, or gate down.
At the time I was there, there was a gate so that no vehicles could go down there.
And did you ever continue down that path to look at anything down there? Are you familiar with that area whatsoever?
I didn't. We metal detected close to the gate, but not further past it.
Okay. And it's a gate that leads to a lake, or I guess more. Oh, you're not sure.
Unfortunately, I don't know. I didn't go back there.
Okay. In looking at Mr. Perez's wounds, obviously, I guess the major wound that we saw was the one to his neck, correct?
That's correct.
And that was the deepest wound. I guess even without any expert knowledge, you can say that's the most serious wound to Mr. Perez, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And the wounds on his back were a lot shallower than that, correct?
Yes, they were very shallow as compared to the one on his neck.
As compared to the one. And even some of the wounds on his back aren't necessarily deep, regardless of comparisons to that large wound.
That's correct.
When And I guess you guys were both looking, and the canine was out there, and you guys were out there looking for other spots of blood, correct?
I don't know if the canine was looking for it, but I specifically looked for multiple areas of blood.
Okay. And the only areas of blood that you found were the spots that you noted around on the pavement, correct?
And then, of course, when we moved Mr. Perez, there was blood underneath of him.
That was I guess the largest deposit of blood that you found at that scene.
Yes, that's correct.
And both in the daytime and then when you came out with your, I don't want to say night vision, but whatever you used to create fluorescence that night, you didn't find any other patterns of blood in your search area.
Yes, when I used the luminescence, the only area that fluoresced was around the deceased body.
All right, and I'm going to jump now to whenever you were examining the Jeep,
Okay.
the green Jeep. When you were looking at these blood spots, were they all readily apparent to you just through your naked eye?
Through my naked eye, yes, they were.
And then once you see these with your naked eye, that's when you prepare swabs and take further tests to, I guess, further examine what that substance actually is.
Yes, it's photographed after I notice it with the scale, and then it's tested with the phenolphthalein and collected whether or not it's possible.
And I'm sorry for skipping ahead.
It's
I'm
okay.
not going through every step again. All right. And in the car, it's fair to say that the majority of the blood that you, or suspected blood that you found in the car was on the passenger side of the car?
The majority of it was, but there was also parts within the front where a driver and a front passenger kind of shared, such as the radio, and then I found some on the ceiling as well.
And when you say the radio, that's the radio, the AC, all that stuff, that center console portion is what you're talking about.
Yes, that's correct.
And you said you also found blood on the gear shift in the middle between the driver's and passenger seats.
That's correct.
I'm going to make an assumption, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm assuming there's a cup holder in that area too, if you remember.
I don't recall exactly where the cup holder is, but I believe it was somewhere near the gear shift.
I know you mentioned that the car was clean and tidy for the most part, but you didn't have to search to find the dentures that you found. They were just laying there on the passenger side floorboard, correct?
Yes, they were in the front passenger floorboard.
Yes, front passenger floorboard. And the gold projectile that you found, was that under the seat or was that just sitting in the back near the suspected blood?
It was located in the back near, if you can recall in the picture, there was a bolt that I guess was from the front passenger seat that had it down to the bottom of the car, and the projectile was found right near that bolt.
Now, sticking with the gold projectile for a while, I guess the next day you went to the house on Schoolhouse Street and found the box of ammunition, correct? And I'm not trying to trip you up on days if
No,
it's
it's
not
okay.
that day.
Yes,
Okay.
It wasn't the next day. It was approximately a week later.
Oh, excuse me. That's my bad then.
I processed the car on Monday. I began processing the car on the 17th, which was a Monday. I then served the search warrant on Tuesday, June 25th.
Okay, and that's my bad. I have it sitting right here in front of me. When you're processing the house, that's when you found the box of bullets and then the gun box as well.
That's correct.
And I know you didn't do any metallurgical testing on the bullets to make sure that they were the same bullets, but they seem substantially similar, correct? The bullets unused in the box and then the used projectile that you found?
The only thing that I found in the car was the projectile. So the projectile was gold in color, and the ammunition, the projectile that would come out of those bullets was gold in color as well. I can't say that they matched, though.
Are they a similar shape and size?
You could tell that the one in the car had been distorted due to its path after leaving a firearm.
Okay. But outside of that, without that distortion, does it appear to be a similar shape and size?
They appeared to be that way.
And the when you're looking at a bullet that it has not been fired, you can kind of see the separation where the firing pin would hit the back of that bullet and then push that projectile forward. So you can see the separation, correct?
That's correct. The firing pin will hit what I refer to as the head stamp on the shell casing, and the projectile is on the top of the shell casing.
And you mentioned that this bullet was distorted from impact with something, correct?
It appeared to be that way, yes.
But you didn't see any places inside that vehicle where that bullet had struck.
No, I didn't.
But you did see what you suspected to be blood on this bullet.
That's correct.
And you weren't responsible for any further testing of that bullet in regards to the substance that was actually found on it?
No, sir.
Also in the car, you didn't see any kind of puncture wounds where a knife could have stabbed a car seat or anything like that, did you?
Not that I observed.
And the gun box that you found also was purported to be a .380 caliber handgun, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Are you able to tell from the box whether it was a revolver or a semi-automatic or an automatic weapon?
I don't recall.
Okay. And I think you touched on it some when we're asking about shell casings. If the gun is a revolver, then shell casings would not be ejected from that gun, correct?
That's correct. If it was a revolver, the shell casing would have stayed in the cylinder of the firearm, but if it's an automatic, it's ejected.
And you never found, in any of your investigation in this case, never found any shell casings or anything like, spent shell casings or anything like that?
I did not find any spent shell casings.
The gun box, there was a receipt inside the box, and it purports to be the gun that was the gun box 4 was the one that was purchased with that receipt, correct? Or proof of purchase from that receipt, correct?
I believe so.
And the gun box appeared to be in fairly new condition, and judging from the receipt, it purchased less than a year before this incident.
I believe so, yes.
And when you went back to do your additional investigation on the 25th, you never found anything that you were able to confirm as additional blood spots or anything in the home, correct?
No, I wasn't.
And just looking at your picture, sorry to back up, but Mr. Perez's body was 2 or 4 feet, according to your estimation, there away from the road, correct?
That's correct.
And even further down the road, you can clearly see his body from your, I guess your picture was a little ways back, but you could still see his body laying there.
Yes, you could.
So there was no, I guess he wasn't concealed in any way from that roadway.
No.
Madam Clerk, can I have exhibits 1 and 2, please? Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes, sir.
No. One and two. And I'm going to draw your attention to just a couple of these exhibits. If you can go to 119.
One only goes up to 18.
Oh, excuse me, 19. I can't read my own writing. And what is that the picture of?
This is the photograph of the back of Mr. Perez's neck.
Okay. And that's when you were talking to Ms. Freeman, you said you believe that to possibly a graze from a bullet.
Yes.
Have you had any training or experience conducting that kind of examination?
Based off of my training and just hands-on experience at various types of crime scenes, this is consistent with what a
A
bullet.
graze?
Mhm.
All right. And that graze, is it breaking the skin or causing any bleeding or anything like that?
It's not really causing bleeding. It's almost like a burn against the skin.
Okay. And using that, if you keep 1-9 open, can you go to 239? Or excuse me, let's go to 240 first.
Okay.
And that, what does that represent there?
This is when I was in the lab, and it was a close-up photograph of the back of Mr. Perez's shirt.
Okay. And I think when going through it with Ms. Freeman, you said that was the defect in the shirt, and you believe that could possibly be that graze as well, correct?
It could possibly be from a defect.
Okay. Can you, I guess, pinpoint, since those are, can you point out 240 on 19?
I can't specifically say where it is. I'd have to see where the tag was on his shirt in this one.
Because you can't see the tag on 19 to know where that was at, correct?
No, that's correct.
But you also don't see that hole that you're purporting to be the graze wound on 19, correct?
That's correct, but his shirt's bunched up in several areas in that photograph.
Okay. So do you have any idea where that hole would be?
It just depends based off of where his tag was on that shirt. I don't have a close-up of any specific area on that shirt.
Okay. And I guess look at it with does looking at 239 help with that analysis whatsoever?
No, because that's the front of his shirt.
Okay. Now, when you're looking at 239 and 240, they appear to be completely red, correct?
That's correct.
As opposed to 19, where it's not. What is the explanation for that?
When Mr. Perez was transported, like I've talked before, he was placed in a body bag. He was then taken to the medical examiner's office where he was laying flat on his back. So more blood could have saturated the clothing during that time period.
So looking at 239 and 240 don't necessarily resemble I guess, the saturation level of blood that existed when Mr. Perez was found.
The front of his shirt was very saturated when we found him, but yes, there could have been more blood that expelled from his body during the removal.
And Couple more questions. Um, when you went and took the pictures of Miss Madonna, you did note that the the scratches or abrasions weren't bleeding, and you didn't see any dried blood at that point in time, correct?
That's correct. I didn't see any dried blood on the markings that I saw on her body.
But especially dealing with the marks there on her chest, you could still see that there was some redness there.
There was redness, like there was an irritation, but there was no dried blood.
Okay. But it had also been a day and a half from the incident until you saw her Monday morning, correct?
I believe it had been a 24-hour period when I responded to the crime scene to when I came.
Well, you know that Mr. Perez, maybe you don't know that Mr. Perez is alleged to have been there for a little while before you guys were ever called to the crime scene.
I don't know the exact time in which the incident occurred.
Okay. Question, Your Honor.
Correct.
All right, just a few things. Agent Louder, you mentioned the grazing and talked about it looks like a grazing or burning against the skin. Is that consistent with someone discharging a firearm and the bullet just kind of passing along the back of the neck as if they missed, maybe?
Yes, it's just like the bullet just kind of skims over a surface. It doesn't enter or exit. And that's basically what that is. It's just a burn mark from where it has barely touched that specific area.
And so basically firing, maybe missing, right?
Yes.
You mentioned on cross-examination the dentures, just for clarification as to, because we've seen both dentures and a suspected bone fragment that y'all testified appear to be part of a denture. Could you tell us what exactly was found on the passenger floor seat?
It was just a small piece of the denture. It wasn't dentures. It was one piece that I found.
Okay. And in terms of the actual projectile, and I know you've testified a little bit about where that was in terms of the bolt, is that the bolt that kind of bolts the chair itself into the floor?
That's correct.
And so in relation to maybe where the passenger seat is, in a car, we all own cars, where is that kind of, bolting material in relation to the seat?
If you were sitting behind the front passenger seat, the bolt would be near where your left foot would be.
Okay. And generally, is that obscured by the seat, or did you, in that Jeep?
In that Jeep, I was able to see it. I would think typically you can't see the bolts, though.
And we've talked a little bit about the scene itself, and of course you went back out at the scene and applied luminescence that evening. Again, since they've raised some questions about it, how large of an area did you apply the luminescence or go through that process?
I would say the luminescence was probably sprayed several feet in either direction of where the deceased was located, just to see if there was any more additional blood that we could find.
And what would create or cause additional blood that might be away from the body in a situation?
Just if maybe the deceased started bleeding somewhere else, or an incident took place somewhere else that we were not aware of at the time.
Okay, and so with the fact that can you draw any conclusions from the fact that there was no indication other than exactly where the body was as to whether the body had traveled any distance or whether there was any kind of incident over which, a tussle where bleeding may have occurred during the course of a tussle?
The only other place that I located the possible blood was in the cul-de-sac area, which wasn't very far away from the deceased as well. So I would say that the only movement was within that area.
And when you say the blood you found there, and I know we saw it on the markers, but I think that was one of the pictures that we may not have looked at, what size were those areas of blood?
It appeared to be rather large droplets of blood, and they were clustered together. That's why I collected 3 separate areas. So I would say the drops were very small to about that size, and they were in 3 more distinct areas on the road, and that's why 3 separate swabs were collected.
And when you say droplets, do you mean there were multiple droplets at those 3 locations, or?
Yes, that's correct. I know for a fact on 1 and 2 there were multiple areas. I think on 3 it was just one large drop.
Okay, and in 1 and 2, how large was the area over which there was some blood?
Just a relatively small area, I would say, about that big.
And so did they appear, just so I make sure we have a visual of what that looked like, just as drops of blood in an area of about 1 foot by 1 foot? Is that a fair description?
That's an accurate description.
You were asked on cross-examination about the amount of blood that was on the shirt as you observed it in the laboratory or in the crime lab. If I could approach, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
And actually, she has before her what's marked as State's Exhibit. If you could go to photograph number 11. If you could please just identify what that is.
It's an overall photograph of the chest of Mr. Perez.
And is that how you found him on the morning of June 16th, 2013?
Yes, it is.
And I believe that the photograph's already been admitted and published to the jury, Your Honor, but I would ask for permission to pass that photograph amongst the jurors.
Ladies and gentlemen, this exhibit is going to be passed among you. You should view it carefully, individually, without comment. Listen, sure.
I guess when everyone came upon the body initially, everyone's talked about his shirt being pulled up, correct?
That's correct.
And some of the pictures you took clearly show that he has his bare back exposed and the shirt is pulled up toward the shoulders or around his head, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
But when you ended up pulling his shirt down, you can see holes in that shirt that would correspond to the stab wounds that Mr. Perez received, correct?
I couldn't tell if they directly corresponded to those wounds. I didn't try to match them up, but there were defects in the shirt.
There were okay. So the stab wounds would be considered a defect as well. So you never tried to go back and pinpoint each hole to his shirt. And I guess the shirt was in pretty bad shape.
The shirt was extremely saturated, and it was very difficult to try and match them up. And I think when I was in the lab, I was able to locate more defects in the shirt then.
Okay. And then, so you were able to locate more defects in the shirt than there were wounds, or like what were you saying there?
Then on scene.
Okay,
I couldn't examine the shirt fully on scene.
okay, that makes sense because it's still on them, and I guess
Yes.
like you said, saturated. And then, like you explained previously with me, the reason that the back of the shirt is no longer white is because they're not keeping Mr. Perez face down anymore once they retrieved his body. No further questions.
Thank you, Brian.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, you may stand there. You may release from her then.
As far as we're concerned, yes, Your Honor.
No objection. Thank you, Agent.
Further evidence, state.
Yes, Your Honor. Stay with call William David Lopez.
You solemnly swear testimony you give this court to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Please be seated.
Good afternoon, Mr. Lopez. If you would please state your name for the record.
William David Lopez.
And Mr. Lopez, do you go by the name Billy? Is that?
Yeah.
And where do you live, Mr. Lopez?
Right now I live in Lakeland, Florida.
And how long have you lived there in Florida?
About 9 months.
And prior to living in Florida, where did you live?
In Spartanburg, South Carolina.
And what kind of work, sir, if any, do you do currently?
Currently I'm on disability.
Okay, and how long have you been on disability?
For about 2 years now.
And prior to that, where did you work?
Costco, wholesale.
And what did you do for them?
Mostly maintenance.
Do you have a family, sir?
Little one. I
Okay.
have a brother left
All right.
and his niece, his kids. So I have nieces and nephews.
All right. Do you have children, or did you have children, sir?
I did.
Tell us about that.
I had a son. His name was William. And when he was 13, he was diagnosed with Ewing sarcoma. It's a type of bone cancer. And he passed away from it when he was 17.
And how long ago has that been, sir?
Just over a couple years ago.
And did he live with you, Mr. Lopez?
He lived with me and my wife until we separated and got divorced, and he lived with his mother.
And who is his mother? Or who was his mother?
My ex-wife, Michelle Lopez,
Okay. And where does she live?
in Inman, South Carolina.
Tell us about your son. What kind of hobbies did he have?
He loved hunting. He loved collecting weapons, any kind of weapons, knives, swords, guns. I taught him a lot about guns since he was very small. And, you know, the safety and everything like that. And he was just an outgoing kid, you know. He's just a regular kid.
And did y'all used to go hunting together?
Yes.
Okay. Is that something that you learned from your family, or?
Actually, no. I just picked it up you know, I got into guns myself, and you know, hooked up with some friends, and you know, we did small hunts and things like that.
When you said he was really into collecting, where did he get these things?
His grandfather used to take him up to Chimney Rock in North Carolina, and there was these little stores there that sold, you know, swords and little knives and things like that. And every time they go up there, he picked, you know, a few up.
And then did he begin to collect guns as well?
Yes.
And how did that come about?
I took him deer hunting, and the people from the organization actually gave him a gun. And then, you know, he just really got into it, so he saved his allowance, and he got, you know, he saved up. Oh, I want this gun, you know, so he saved up and he would get it.
And did he ever get any guns or knives as birthday or Christmas presents?
Yes.
And when he would save his allowance, would y'all go shopping together to buy these guns?
Yes.
You were generally with him?
Yes.
And what kinds of things in terms of, you know, safety and those sorts of things did you teach your son?
Well, years ago we lived in South Florida, and I was a armed security guard at the Indian Casino, the Seminole Casino, and I carried a .357 Magnum, and I would sit there and tell them how to open it, how to empty it, you know, this is how you hold it when it's empty, how do you know it's safe, you know. And there was a few times where, you know, I told him, just, you know, I'm in a rush. I said, William, hand me my gun. And he's like, I can't, I don't know if it's safe. And I said, no, it's open, you could see there's, he's like, I don't know if it's safe. And I was like, very good. You know, I would test him, and he picked it up so quick, you know. It's just one of the things he fell in love with.
And so people who knew him, and he went by William, is that right?
Yes.
To know him, were you familiar with this hobby of his? I mean, was it something that family and friends knew about? And
Yeah. Yes.
it's something he liked to talk about?
Yes.
Okay. You mentioned a few minutes ago that you, I think, have one sibling remaining.
Yes.
Tell me what your family originally was made up of in terms of how many brothers and sisters.
Well, I had an older brother, John, who was married to Joanna.
Okay, when you say Joanna, you mean the defendant in this case?
Yes.
And so your older brother was John Lopez?
Yes.
And that was one of her prior husbands?
Yes.
Okay. And tell us a little bit about John.
He had a lot of problems. He had quite a bit on his plate. He struggled with addiction, with drugs, and it just seemed like he could never get things right, you know. And back in 2001, he took his own life.
That was about 14 years ago, is that?
Yes.
How long were he and the defendant married, if you know?
I don't know.
Did you get to know the defendant during that time?
Yes.
They were married?
Yes.
And where were y'all living at that time, if you remember?
New Rochelle, New York.
Okay.
That's where I was living.
Okay. And is that where your family originally is from, sir?
No, we're from the Bronx, New York.
And where was was your brother John Lopez living?
He was living with Joanna up in, I forgot the town.
Somewhere in New York?
Yes, it was a little upstate.
And at some point, did they subsequently divorce?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you remember at all when that might have been?
I don't.
Was it in relation to when your brother died? Was it prior to that?
Oh, yeah, it was way after that.
You mean his death was way after they divorced?
Yes.
Okay. Did you go through a period of time when you didn't have any contact with Miss Madonna?
Yes.
Okay. And at some point, did the two of you begin to communicate again?
Yes.
And do you remember how that came about?
I'm not 100% sure. I think it was Facebook.
Okay.
I think it was Facebook, and we got in touch with my niece Michelle and Rachel, and we made arrangements for them to come and stay a weekend, and get to know them, because I haven't seen them since they were babies.
And you've mentioned Michelle and Rachel. Are those the daughters, or some of the daughters of Miss Madonna?
Yes.
Defendant?
Yes.
And do you remember roughly when it was that you had contact with them and they came to visit?
The first time, I think Michelle was 17, and I think now she's 21.
Sometime in the last 4 or 5 years. And during the last few years, did you also have occasion to see?
A couple of times.
And when were those?
Excuse me. I went over down to see them in North Carolina. So, I was hanging out with Joanna and the day together.
And did you come up just for the day, or did you come up and
Yes.
stay over?
No, just for the day.
Where were they living at the time?
I'm not 100% sure what city or anything like that. But
Do you remember anything about the house?
yeah, it was a very nice house. It was in a very nice neighborhood.
And what, if anything, do you remember about that visit?
Nothing really. Me and Jose just started talking about coffee. Because I like coffee and he liked coffee. So we were talking about coffee for about an hour and a half or 2 hours.
And y'all hit it off and got along? And,
Yeah.
did there come a point in time in which Miss Madonna came down, the defendant came down to see you or your son William in South Carolina?
Yes.
And can you tell me about that?
She came down and it seemed like something was off. She
Did
was.
she come down to see William? Was that
Yes.
the purpose?
Yes.
Okay. And go ahead, I'm sorry, sir. Seemed like something was off.
Yeah, she seemed like, it seemed like something was off with her. She was like, a little excited or something, But, she didn't say anything about it really, so I just, I just blew it off. I didn't ask anything. And then, she told me that, there's been a lot of break-ins around her neighborhood, and she was scared. She said, both houses on either side of her got broken into. There was another house down the street that was broken into, and she was scared. She's like, I don't know what to do. I don't know I don't have any weapons. I don't know. I can't protect myself. And she's like, I don't think I have the money to buy anything, to buy a gun, a used gun or anything. And I says, well, you're here. I'll take you to a pawn shop or something. We could see how much a used gun is. And we go there, and it was out of her price range. And she's like, well, maybe next month when I get my check, I'll go back and get it, or just get one up here. And I was like, yeah, that sounds good. So we get back to my ex-wife's house, and my son William heard about it because he couldn't travel. He was bedridden by this time. And
When you say he heard about it, I mean, kind of unfold for us, if you will, sir. Y'all came back. She had come down to South Carolina
yes,
to visit him.
yes.
Do you remember when this was?
I can't recall.
Okay.
I can't recall when it was.
All right. And do you remember, and we'll go back to that in a few minutes, but when you got to the house, kind of talk to us about how that visit went, and when you say William learned of this, how did that happen?
Yeah, well, she started talking about it a little bit, and then it became the topic of conversation. And then William said, well, you take this gun, you could use this one. I'll show you how to use it and everything. And she's like, no, are you sure? And I was like, William, you sure? And he's like, yeah, we got to protect our family. Yeah, that was his big thing. He wanted the family protected.
So did he have some concern for her safety?
Yes.
And what was that based on?
Based on what she had said about the break-ins in the neighborhood.
And so what kind of gun was that?
It was a 380, a Taurus 380.
And so he started offering her this gun.
Yes.
And what happened then?
Eventually she took it, and, we all agreed that next month when she gets her check, that she'll return the gun, and, we can go find her something that's comfortable for her. And she agreed, and so...
So did y'all talk, or did he make any effort to talk to her about how to use the gun?
Yes, he showed her how to use it, and I was there to confirm everything he said was right.
And so thinking about the gun that he gave to her, I think you said it was a Taurus 380. Did you know how many shots?
5.
5 shots.
Yes.
And when he gave it to her, did he just give it to her as the gun, or what all did he give to her? Was it in a box?
No, yeah, it was in a box. The receipt was in there, everything.
Your Honor, if I may approach.
Yes, ma'am.
This one?
I'm going to show you what has been marked as State's Exhibit number 29. Do you recognize what this is?
Yes, that's the box.
And when you say that's the box,
That's the box the gun was in.
so this would have been your son's
Yes.
box. And inside of this,
Yeah, inside on the
Box.
lid here, the
Right.
receipt was taped in there.
okay, and in looking at what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 29A, it appears that it is from a store, T&K Outdoors.
Yes.
Are you familiar with that
Yes,
store?
yes.
Tell us about that. How are you familiar with it?
Well, it was, it started out with, this guy just had a trailer, a little, like a half a trailer, and he ran a gun store, a gun business out of there. And after a while, he upgraded, and he got, you know, a regular storefront and everything, and a bigger store. And he was right around the corner from us. So pretty much anything we needed, we went to him.
That was kind of your regular stopping place.
Yeah. He had good prices, and he was, you know, very fair and honest.
Do you remember what, if anything else, William gave to the defendant?
A knife.
Okay. And do you remember, can you tell us what that knife looked like?
If I remember correctly, it was black and silver. And it had like a design on the side of it. It was a folding knife.
And and do you remember the size of the knife? Just
It was about 4 to 6 inches, the
when you
blade.
say 4 to 6 inches, the blade.
The blade, yes.
Anything else that William would have given?
No, that's all he gave to her.
How long did the defendant stay as part of the visit?
I'd say probably about 4 hours.
And is that including the time that y'all went to the pawn shop?
Yes.
Okay. And so how long after where in the process of those 4 hours was it that William gave these things to her?
It was probably towards the middle of the visit. It was a couple hours in.
Okay. Did y'all have any discussion? I think you indicated that there was some discussion about the use of the gun.
Yes.
Any discussion about the use of the knife?
Not really. William just told her that, you know, if somebody breaks into your house and all you have is the knife, just unfold it, and, you know, if you're close enough, just stab them. That's it, you know.
Did all of the conversation about these weapons, did it all revolve around the defendant's fear that houses in her neighborhood had been broken into?
Yes, pretty much.
Okay. Was there any other discussion regarding her being afraid?
No.
If I can have one moment, Your Honor.
Yes, ma'am.
Questions for you.
Finish
Okay.
with that.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Lopez.
How you doing?
I'm good, sir. How long have you known Miss Madonna?
Long time.
I guess the 90s or...
Yeah, at least.
Okay.
At least.
And were you still living in New York when she and your brother met?
Yes.
Okay. And did you get to hang out with her or get to know her while y'all were all up there? Or?
Yeah. My brother had a wood finishing business. He worked out of the house. So, you know, I went up there and helped him, you know, a bunch of times. And, you know, hung out with the kids. They were just babies, so, you know, just...
Now,
playing with
which
them.
babies were around at the time? Was it Rachel and Michelle? Or
Rachel and Michelle.
Rachel and Michelle.
Yes.
Now, did you ever know Miss Madonna to be violent in any sort of way?
No.
Was your brother ever violent in any sort of way?
No.
Did you ever have to call the police on your brother or assist with their
Sexual
relationship?
relevance.
Okay.
So you never knew of any problems, physical altercations between the two of them?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Your Honor, we're asking about a self-defense case where we're talking about multiple relationships. I think it's an appropriate question. When, just generally, you knew Miss Madonna to be a good person, you never had any problems with her yourself?
Objection, Your Honor.
You can answer it.
Oh, I'll answer it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had no problem with
All
that.
And then at some point you moved out of New York, and while they were still up there?
Yes.
Okay. And obviously, did you keep in touch with them a lot? Were you close to your brother, or?
When he was straight, yes, we did, contact each other and keep in touch.
And when the way you say that, it sounded like he had a problem being straight and staying on the straight path.
Yes, like I said earlier, he did have a problem with drugs, and I didn't like to associate with him when he was using.
Did you know anything about Miss Madonna and her sobriety?
Yes.
You knew that she had her own things before, but she was trying to stay sober and trying to help your brother along with it as well?
Yes.
And you've already mentioned this with the DA. I guess obviously Miss Madonna and your brother ended up getting a divorce and going their separate ways, correct?
Yes.
And your brother moved out to Arizona.
Arizona.
And you said he passed away in 2001.
Yes.
Do you know what that was about?
Yes, I do.
What was that over?
He had a girlfriend out there, and they had a child, and she didn't want to be with him anymore, and she was basically walking all over him, and he told me, because we were in touch at this point, he told me it got to the point where they would all be home and he would be playing with his daughter or feeding her or something like that, and his girlfriend would bring other men into the house and go upstairs and have sex with them while he was in the house with his daughter.
So the pain from that obviously is something that led him to...
I guess it was too much, yes.
After all that, I guess you had kind of lost the link, the commonalities between you and Miss Madonna, so you guys fell out of touch for a while?
Yes.
And then, just like everybody reconnects, you get on Facebook and you see, Joanna Madonna or You May Know John Lopez pop up, and that's how you guys reconnected.
Yes.
And do you remember who contacted who first? Did you contact her first? Or?
No, I think she contacted us first.
Okay. Said, hey, remember me, and remember
Yeah,
Rachel and Michelle. And all that. And I guess your son and Rachel and Michelle are around the same age, is correct?
They were, yes.
And so it was important for all of you guys to say, hey, you got a cousin that you ain't met in a while.
Yeah.
Go hang out. And you guys did that. Y'all met up and...
Absolutely, yes.
And how many times did you meet Miss Madonna with Jose?
With Jose, I think just once or twice.
And in those once or twice, those two occasions that you guys were all hanging out, did you ever see any problems between Joanna and Jose?
No.
And you said you and Jose seemed to get along and found some common interest and were able to talk about it and just sit there and hang out?
Yep.
When, I guess in 2013, did your son's Ewing sarcoma get a lot worse?
Well, he was being treated for it. That's when he was diagnosed in 2013.
Okay.
And a couple of years later, I'd say probably 2 years later, it went into remission. And the doctor, all the doctors told us that it could come back. That there was two types of bone cancer that were really bad. And one of them was Ewing sarcoma. The other one was osteosarcoma. Now, they said with the osteosarcoma, it's basically a death sentence. And they said the Ewing sarcoma can be treated and healed. So he did go into remission for a while. And he was off chemotherapy and radiation. And just like the doctors said, they said if it comes back with a vengeance. And it did.
And it was around the time that it was coming back, was that when Miss Madonna came to visit?
Yes.
So at that point in time, it had already come back, and he was already on bed rest, and you knew that it was coming back with a vengeance at that point.
Yes.
And that's when, I guess, did your ex-wife contact Miss Madonna and let her know that things were, I guess, deteriorating?
Yeah, I'm sure one of us contacted her and told her.
And because of this, I'm sure you guys had a ton of people wanting to visit you, correct?
Yes.
And I guess some people thought they were coming to have their last visit with your son, correct?
Yes.
And Miss Madonna came down. I think, do you know if she had tried to schedule something before and you guys had to work or something like that? Were you aware of that conversation?
I can't recall that.
But Miss Madonna ended up scheduling a time and coming down and
Yes.
hanging out with you that day.
Yes.
And at that point in time, just to get everything cleared, you were staying separately from your ex-wife and your son.
Yes.
In the same town, but different
Yes.
apartments. Was your ex-wife very protective about your son's
Oh,
time
yes. Oh,
at this
yes.
point in time?
Very much.
And I guess it's understandable, but people start to get annoying at that point. Were people ever annoying to you about visiting and bringing stuff and what do you need and things like that?
Kind of. It got to that, it got to that point. Just people would not stop coming over, phone calls, emails, texts. It was just, sometimes we had to shut our phones off and, because it was just too much,
Because a lot of people cared about your son and knew about
Yeah.
And I guess that's where your ex-wife's protection kind of kicked in, like,
Yes.
I'm setting these hours, get
Yeah.
in, get out, all this stuff. And obviously your son wasn't in the best health either, and he couldn't sustain a ton of visits from random people bringing random germs into the house and things like
No,
that.
he couldn't.
Talk a little bit more about his weapon collection.
He had a lot of swords. He had a lot of little knives, pocket knives, all different, like kind of swords that strap onto your arm. And I mean,
Wolverine?
yeah, Wolverine type stuff. And, yeah, he always, he had a lot of knives.
And that was just his thing. Some people collect baseball cards. His thing was guns and weapons and knives.
Exactly.
And you had said that Miss Madonna didn't come up to him and ask him for a gun, did she?
No.
You said y'all were discussing, you said something was always off about her when she came down. She seemed nervous or panicked.
Yes.
And she said it was about the break-ins in the neighborhood.
Break-ins, yes.
Did she mention anything about Jose leaving as well, or her asking Jose to leave? Did she talk to you any about that?
No. Never heard anything about that.
But she didn't come looking for a gun or begging for a gun. You guys were talking, and then your son jumped in and said, I've got you covered.
Yes.
And that was just his way. He was a protector with everybody in your family.
Yes.
And I think you said that eventually the Miss Madonna took the gun, but was she reluctant to take the gun and saying, no, I'll come back and things like that?
Uh, no, she pretty much took it.
Okay. I just said, no, I know you said eventually she took it.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and you even told him, no, you don't give her your new gun. It was
Yeah,
a brand
yeah.
new gun in the box. She can come back down in 2 weeks when she gets paid and get her gun.
Yeah.
And when you guys were at the gun store where you're at, and she couldn't afford a gun, she was resigned, saying, "Hey, I'll just come back whenever I get it, and you can help me out then, or I can get it in North Carolina later."
Yeah, that's basically what happened. It was
And then, but you said your son offered up to her, and you made an agreement to bring it back and
yes.
all that stuff. And it was a hammerless 380 revolver.
Yes.
Do you know if your son loaded it for her while she was down there?
Yes, it was loaded.
And then did he give her a box of bullets as well?
I'm pretty sure he gave her a box with at least some extra ammo in it.
And obviously 380 ammo would go into that 380 Taurus.
Yes, yes.
When you were coming, and as a normal topic of conversation with your son about guns and weapons and things like that, that's what he liked to talk about.
Oh, yes.
And I think your ex-wife had made a provision that you're not supposed to talk about his sickness at that point in time.
Yeah.
Did you know she had that rule?
Yeah, she really didn't want, she wanted his mind off of it as much as possible.
And even after this incident, I think Michelle was super close to your son and continued
Yes.
to come down there. And that's Joanna's daughter.
Yes, Michelle came down many times for many visits.
And I think you and Michelle are pretty close too at this point.
Yes.
Did you have any indication that your son's gun would be used for this purpose, the purpose that you're here for today?
Absolutely not.
And did Ms. Madonna give you any indication that that was going to happen?
Absolutely not.
Indicated that the general line on this visit, was she by herself when she came?
Yes.
Okay, and so, and was this the only time that she came to visit your son? Do you remember if she came another time?
I believe time may have been one other time.
Is this the only time you remember her having come visit?
Yes.
And he had been diagnosed several years before.
Yes. Yes.
And in the other visits or the other opportunities, was that more, just so we all are on the same page, about Michelle?
Yes. 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 There was one time that we actually drove halfway, and we met up, and Michelle came with us after that.
That, when the defendant came on that day to visit, at some point, as you testified, y'all ended up going to a pawn shop to look for a gun.
Yes.
Did she ask you or initiate a conversation about how she could get a gun?
Yeah, she asked about guns, and I need something to protect myself, my family, and that's when I told her, I could take you here, get it, and I'll show you how to use it. Because myself, I have many guns, all different types, rifles, AK-47s, SKS, all kinds of stuff.
And she initiated the conversation about obtaining a weapon and
Yeah, to go for protection.
that again was from the break-ins in the neighborhood.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no other questions.
Think along those lines?
Yes, along those lines, Your Honor. She didn't initiate a conversation with your son to have him give her a gun or anything like that, did she?
No, not with my son.
And and she said that she needed it for protection for her family.
Yes.
And at that point in time when she came down, I guess you said a lot of people started coming down that you may not necessarily have seen in a while because William's deterioration, because the cancer had come back.
Yes.
No further questions, Your Honor.
No, Your Honor.
Be released from this thing.
Yes, Your Honor.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lopez.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna, you can stay right there. Ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna take our evening recess at this point. During this time, it is your duty not to talk among yourselves about this case. It's duty not to talk to the parties, the witnesses, or the lawyers about anything at all. It's further duty not to talk to anyone else, to allow anyone else to talk with you, to say anything in your presence about this case. If anyone communicates with you in any way, in any form, you overhear something, see something, let the sheriff know about it when you come in. Avoid reading, watching, listening to accounts of this trial on the media. Don't do any individual research or investigation on your own about any issue touching on this trial. Stay away from your smartphones, your computers, if it has to do with this trial in any way at all. And do not form express opinion about this case during this time. With that, ladies and gentlemen, while everyone else will remain seated, leave your notes in your seats, and I'll excuse the clerk when you ask you to return to the jury room tomorrow morning at 9:30.